Good evening to you. My name is Linda Thompson. I serve the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County as chapter president. We are very pleased that you have joined us this evening on Zoom. Before we go along into our presentation this evening, I wish to remind you that you should please mute yourselves. We don't want to have accidental interruptions of our panelists, so please do mute yourself. There will be some time, I believe, at the end to have some questions. If you can remember your questions till the end, terrific. If not, and you need to type them into the chat, please feel free, but they will be attended to later. Please be respectful of everyone tonight and don't use the chat to carry on a conversation or to send greetings to someone that you know that's attending. On Zoom, that's much like people who whisper in the aisles, in the seats, you know, if you're at something at Van Wezel or whatever. We are recording this presentation as well as others. Always go up on our YouTube site. You can always link to the YouTube from our website or from our email messages on news. The Sarasota Voter is the most common one that goes out. So, and you're welcome, of course, to be in the know on everything by joining the League. So I hope you got those messages. And I again, thank you to the members of our League chapter, of other League chapters, and of the public at large that are with us this evening. Our moderator this evening is a lovely woman by the name of Margaret Bryant. And Margaret is going to act as moderator this evening. So please, everyone, something I forgot to mention, go ahead and silence your cell phones that might be sitting right next to your device. And do go ahead and mute yourselves so that we're not accidentally disruptive. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to present Margaret Bryant.
Thank you, Linda. Welcome to everyone. It's nice to see this many people here who are interested in learning what we're all interested in learning about, which is how we better talk to one another. Tonight, we have Miracle on Longboat Key, Democrats and Republicans attempt to close the partisan divide. I'll just give a little quick background on this wonderful project if you aren't familiar with it. Since early 2021, 4 members of the Democratic Club of Longboat Key and 4 members of the Longboat Key Republican Club have been meeting to address the lack of civility and extreme partisanship that appears to be ever present in our political lives. 4 members from the group, dubbed Miracle on the Key, will discuss tonight the progress made and process used to establish a civil discourse among the group, which hopefully will set an example for others to follow, most especially our political leaders. We do have a substitute tonight. One of the 4 that has been part of this group was not able to be with us tonight, so we have a very able replacement, I'm sure. Our speakers tonight are Paul Hilbert. Paul is a businessman and a concerned citizen who moved to Longboat Key from California 4 years ago. He grew up in the Midwest and attended Denison University, where he achieved a BA degree, and the University of Michigan, where he earned a master's degree. Welcome, Paul. Scott Gray is a retired Air Force Major General and a retired Vice President from Lockheed Martin. He is gravely concerned about the divisiveness in our government and our nation, and in our inability to civilly discuss issues. He moved to Sarasota 3 years ago and is a full-time resident. Robert Gary has had a long history of distinguished government service as a lawyer with the U.S. Department of Justice in Ohio, and went on to represent the government in many other matters. He's a prolific lecturer and writer, in addition to his practice as a class action litigator, and he's been a frequent lecturer on various topics in Sarasota County. Ed Sobel, who is our replacement for Becky Vander Bogert, who is unfortunately not able to be with us tonight, but we have Ed, so welcome, Ed. Ed is a retired union organizer from New Jersey, and that's what he told me to say. So that's what he can add to that when it's his turn to talk, if there's more he'd like all of us to know about him. So let's start the program. This is a pretty not, I won't say rehearsed, but a oiled group. So they're going to really take over from here. And I think we start with Bob, and he'll kick off a discussion about how did we get here. So Bob, if you could take it away.
Well, I was very concerned from 2016 on the lack of dialogue between Republicans and Democrats and how personal things were getting, how divisive. And I even felt that government was, rather than bringing us together, was pulling us apart. So I had reached out to the then president of the Longboat Key Democratic Club saying, I think we should try and do a project with the Republicans. And that was at the time not well received. Now, when Ed became the president, I resubmitted the idea to him and he embraced it. And I had a friend who was part of the Republican Club, and I talked to him, and he contacted Scott, and Scott said, I think this is an important idea. And then we somehow bumped into Rousseau, and just by happenstance, and she had been facilitating talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I thought, well, if she's been facilitating talks between the Palestinians and Israelis, she should be able to handle the Republicans and the Democrats. And so I don't know if I'm stepping anybody's toes here, but Rousseau, when we talked to Rousseau, she said, I don't want to do this unless you're all totally committed to it. And she met with us separately to see what was our commitment to the process. And an important part of what we're doing is we are not trying to convince anybody that we're right and you're wrong, or that's not what this is about. This is about dialogue, respectful exchange of ideas, listening to why people have their views on immigration or whatever it might be, and understanding why they've come to the conclusions they have respectfully. And we have done that quite well, I think. And we have gone on for several, over a year now, reaching into two years. And it's become a place for me that I always felt was a safe haven, because I knew there were people interested in politics that were responding in a sane and rational fashion. When I turned on the television, it was just so distressing. I honestly believe that America was heading towards a populist authoritarian government, where elections would happen, but they would be controlled by the government. And that didn't happen. And so that's kind of how it all came together. And then after our first meeting with Russell Wyman's assistance, we learned we had a lot in common. We were able to talk to each other. We all liked each other. And very often, those people that you are so antagonistic towards because of their views, once you meet them, you like them. And once the personal connection is made, then it's easy to exchange ideas in an environment that allows for that. And that's what democracy is. And our government has stopped doing that. And if the government isn't going to do it, the people have to do it. And so we see ourselves as sort of one small step in the direction of the people talking to each other. We want the government to know that we expect civility, and we expect the truth. And one of the big issues always to me has been, and I don't want to go on too long, but this issue of the big lie, that the 2020 election was somehow stolen. And when we presented that to the group, particularly to Scott, said, no, that's not, I don't want to speak for Scott, but that's not what happened. The election was a legitimate election. And for me, that was, I can work with these people, because that was my wall that I couldn't get over. So that's kind of where it's at. I think that if anybody wants to chime in, please do, and I'll turn it over to whoever is.
Bob, it's Margaret again. Could you just tell the rest of us about Rochelle, who she is? You mentioned her a few times, but probably a lot of the people here don't know who that is.
So Rochelle, well, I mean, we didn't know Rochelle. And so I was talking to somebody about, we like to do this. And they said, well, you need a facilitator. Well, we didn't have a facilitator and we didn't know a facilitator. But somebody said, I just bumped into a person in the lobby of my building. And had gone all over the world working with different groups, mediating conflict. She'd done it in Indonesia. And I said she'd worked with the Palestinians and Israelis. She was a international Holocaust expert and professor. So give me your phone number. I'm not particularly shy. So I called her up and I said, we like to do this. You don't know me, I don't know you. And she said, well, let's go out and have coffee. So we went out and had coffee. I was very impressed with her. And she said, put together your two groups. I want the sides to be even and balanced. And then I want to meet with each of you separately. And I don't want the other group there when I have this meeting. And then I will let you know if I think there's something I can do here. And she hasn't charged us a nickel, by the way. This is not for money. This is we're all doing this because we care about our country. And so she bought into the idea. And I will let somebody else tell us about the first meeting, because the first meeting was critical. If we had been left to our own devices, I think we would have been at each other's necks and throats within 5 minutes over some issue that we probably still haven't talked about. And she managed that. She knew how to bring us together. So and what she did was she separated us. She said, pair off with somebody, and she sent us off to talk to the other person. And that's how the whole thing began. But the first meeting was a critical meeting. So did that answer your question?
I think it did. Scott, do you want to pick it up from here and tell us about maybe the backgrounds of some of the other members of the group and some struggles that you've had staying on track with this project in civil discourse?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. You've met four of us already. I will say that Ed was the president of the Democratic Club of Longboat Key. I don't think that came out in the introduction. So he's my counterpart because I am the president of the Republican Club. But we've got other members, four other members. Two of them are educators at the highest levels, world renowned, if you will. We've got businessmen, and then we've got a lady that's been an elected official on Longboat Key. So it's a very diverse background, and we get together, and that diversity, I think, makes us stronger because it gives us an awful lot of different ways of looking at an issue or whatever. I do want to take a moment here because I think it's important that everybody understands we haven't solved anything. We haven't really tried to solve anything. All right. We have done some good and we've had some interviews, we've had some exposure and that kind of good stuff. Probably the best thing we did was bring Ron Turner together for a bipartisan meeting last September prior to all the elections and everything. Sorry, August prior to the elections. But you know, it's one of the things where when I feel concerned or uncomfortable or somebody else does, we can send off an email to one of our counterparts and say, hey, can you explain this to me? And I'll use one example. I was very concerned very, very early on, and I mean very early on, about CRT. And it just absolutely was destroying my sleep at night because I was so concerned about it. And I threw it out to the group. And Ed very rapidly said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so Ed and I started exchanging emails and subject matter expert opinions on it and everything, and educated ourselves as to the pros, the cons, and that kind of stuff. Not sure we solved anything, but at least I had a counterpart that I could go to and share my concerns and share literature with, and he felt the same way. And there's been a few examples of that. But I do want to stress, we really haven't solved anything major. We haven't taken on any major topic as of yet to really sit down and say, okay, what are we going to solve? We did put out a joint communique on gun control, and I thought that was very good. And we've you know, done a few things, but nothing major, if you will, as far as diving into the tough issues. For example, Bob was talking about the first meeting, my first meeting with a Democrat counterpart named Lucy, and a brilliant lady, educator. And she and I sat down and we were supposed to figure out how to introduce our counterpart to the group. And that took us all of about 5 minutes. We had 10 minutes of time left, and we all of a sudden started talking issues, which was not on the agenda. And we very rapidly agreed that, you know, these are all issues that we agree they're issues, but we might want to solve them in different ways. But it didn't matter what it was, abortion, gun control, immigration. We all agreed these are issues that our government is failing to address. And I'll let it go at that.
Okay. Ed, at this point, the outline has, as the facilitator, you standing in for Becky, describing the critical role of Russell in getting you all to work together and keeping you on point. Do you want to speak to that, or do you want to, you know, ask somebody else to do that? But go right ahead. We'd like to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. I think the conversation already has sort of teased out some of these things, but when Russell first got us together, and I agree with Scott and Bob, if she had not been there, this probably would not have worked. Having said that, what she did with us was very simple, very basic. She had us, as Scott described, talk to each other to get to know each other a little bit better as human beings. And then she did another exercise where we had to list what was important to us. And lo and behold, if you put, you know, 8 Americans in a room and say, what's important to you? The list comes out pretty damn similar for all of us, right? We all want the best for our families. We all want, you know, access to healthcare. We want a stable economy. We want a peaceful world. You know, and as I said, the best for our kids and our grandkids. And so we have all these things in common rather than try and talk about what are the things we have differences on, because those things exist as well. But we have more things in common. And I think that was a very important part of it. One of the things I learned actually from what observing Scott and Lucy's, when they came back from their little one-on-one, was that, again, if you look at most Americans, agree on most things in a general sense, right? So you have Republicans who have a divergence of views. Some of them think, abortion should be totally illegal. Some of them think it should be totally legal. Some of them think there should be some restrictions or whatever. There's amongst Republicans as amongst Democrats, there's, a broad spectrum of views. And again, if you get a chance to talk like that, then you sort of break down the bogeyman, scary person that you want to yell at and call names, right? So we never got down a path where it turned into animosity. We did on one occasion, Rossell had a yellow card. If you follow football or soccer, you throw a yellow card when there's about to be a bad situation. And she did it one time, made us stop, everybody take a deep breath, and then go back into the discussion. But all in all, what she did with us, on the one hand, was very simple, on the other hand, very brilliant. She got us to recognize what we had in common, and so we could begin discussing what we have differences on, with the perspective that, I don't have to hate them because they disagree with me on whatever.
So Ed, it sounds like you could say that when you mutually introduce each other, it's a way to develop mutual respect and get the group talking to one another about themselves. I find that interesting, and I can see how it would work. It puts people in a position where I'm going to be speaking about someone who has differences of opinion from me, but my role as the introducer is to say who this person is, and that you, just by having those words in my mouth and saying them, it maybe loosens up something. Can you speak to that? I find that interesting.
Yeah. Again, I think it's more because she had us focused on the humanity of each of us, right? That and then it's you want to talk about differences. Scott grew up in Alabama and had a career in the Air Force. I grew up on the streets in New Jersey and had a career as a union organizer, right? Very, very, very different. Last night, we happened to have dinner together at a function, right? Because getting to know each other, he's a concerned citizen who, believes in this country, and he's my neighbor, right? So we have a lot more in common than we do in where we came from or any of the other differences that might be identified.
Right. Well, thank you. Paul, we talked a little about Rossell and her ability to get people from the various degrees of difference on a spectrum to talk to one another. Can you speak a little bit more about her talent in doing that, and the brilliance perhaps of asking all 8 of you to list privately on a stickum, I guess that's a sticky note, 2 key characteristics that you want for the United States, and then post them and have your discussion springboard from there?
Yes, Margaret, Ed alluded to this a little bit, but we each got an opportunity to write down 2 goals that we had for the country, or have for the country, that we want to leave for our kids and at our age, grandkids. And so 8 times 2 is 16. And what came back was not 16 different items, but 8 items and really no outliers. I mean, there are things that are pretty basic, like non-discrimination, non-violence, equal opportunity. All 8 of us love the country, and that was probably a skewed sample size because we all volunteered to do this. And so it was amazing how similar our goals were, despite the fact that we knew we had different ways to get there. And that gets back to another point, and that is if we look at the citizens of the United States and talk about this great middle, where the congruence of beliefs is amazingly similar. Yet the media, we haven't talked about the media yet, focuses on the extremes of the right and the extremes of the left. So the dialogue is kind of taken from us, and is it kind of we're a prisoner to this discussion of the most extremes of both parties' views, and that's really unfortunate. So we had a lot of discussions about the media. We shared with one another our media sources, and I think on balance, we all try to find objective ways to look at the news and watch not just one or two, but several different sources to get us informed.
Margaret, I'd like to add on here if I may.
Sure.
There's a couple of things that came out of this. The first was Ed invited us to come join the Democratic Club's luncheon. And so we went over and we did that, and it was very enlightening. We were treated very, very well. And we actually got to participate slightly and talk about what we wanted and everything. And then we invited them to come to one of our dinners, and we actually had all 8 of us up on a panel talking at that dinner. So doing that, I think it was a quest for understanding, if you would, and to show our respective clubs what we were trying to do. Now, I want to follow that up by saying that on my part, at least, and I think some of the others would probably agree, the feedback I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive, where the vast majority of the folks out there, when they learn of this, they come up and they say, hey, thank you for trying, and I hope you're successful, and that kind of stuff. There have been a few naysayers, like, why waste your time and that kind of stuff, but it's probably 90% positive feedback I've had. And I think the others have probably been somewhere similar to that.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you're mentioning 8 people, and Paul did too. We see 4 of you here. The other 4 are actively part of this group that you're.
Yeah, they are. One of them's sick. She was supposed to be here tonight, Becky, and then we've got a couple others who just weren't able to make it tonight. But yeah, there are 8 of us, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats.
We're actually meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, we are. And we're not all men, by the way, even though that's what's here tonight. So.
No, we are much more balanced when we get together in person. And as Scott said, we are, I was a Bernie Democrat, right? But we are all really in the center in terms of the politics of, nobody has, crazy, wacky ideas.
Scott,
So, can you summarize what you've been doing to spread the message of civil discourse? How is your, what you've discovered, which sounds like it has been rewarding and enlightening and eye-opening for all of you, and how have you been spreading that message? You're here with us tonight, obviously that's one way. And I understand you've gotten some good press coverage, and maybe we've been on television and on the radio, and do you want to speak about that a little bit?
well,
I would say that's one of the things that we struggle with, is in terms of how can we have a bigger impact? How can we spread this word more widely? And so we struggle with that. That's one of the frustrations in our meetings. But as Scott pointed out at the beginning, if you take a step back, we had the head of the Republican Club get introduced to and speak to the Democratic Club membership. We had the head of the Democratic Club get introduced to and allowed to speak to the Republican Club. We have done TV, we have done radio. We did do the joint thing with the supervisor of elections. So in our little small world of here of Southwest Florida, I think we have put ourselves out there as role models for folks, you know, that take a chance, do this, talk to somebody and get to know them and listen to what they say. Could be a better country.
You know, it's kind of amazing because our first interview was with the Herald Tribune, Zach Anderson, and that got picked up by USA Today and went national. And so we had phone conversations and email conversations with folks out of Bend, Oregon, that were interested in what we're doing. You know, so it's amazing, this little bitty flicker of hope, if you will, that we've got going has actually got some legs. You know, so.
And there's talk of CNN coming out to do an interview possibly. And Scott and I had a program sponsored by Ollie where we each discussed what we saw from our own perspectives as the greatest threat to America. And I think, to me, this is an idea. It's more important that the idea gets communicated, just like you're allowing us to do now, so other people can in some way emulate it. We don't hold ourselves out as a group who's going to solve problems, because our goal is communication and respect for the ideas of the other, and that is something that America seems to be hungry for. And that's why I think there has been so much interest in what we're doing. And of course, we think it was Ed that came up with this miracle on the key. Why should it be a miracle the Republicans and Democrats are talking to each other? The name alone tells you everything. People found that so extraordinary. Why should that be extraordinary in a democracy? That should be an everyday event. But it wasn't too long ago that it simply was not an everyday event. And we want to make it one where you can reach across the table and have a civil political discussion and not make it personal. And certainly because someone has an idea different than yours, they're not your enemy. We share so much more than we are separated by, and we are certainly not each other's enemy. And we should turn our backs on any political leader that seeks to suggest that we are each other's enemy, in my view.
I'm going to jump in here with a couple of questions in the chat, because it's picking up on something which is your group's organization and how you keep it going. And then I want to come back to something else, but some questions. Do you continue to meet regularly? If so, where? Who coordinates the meetings and how often do you meet? Anybody?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. We do continue to meet. We took kind of a couple months of the summer off because we were in disparate parts of the country. And, you know, as I think Ed indicated or Bob indicated, we have a meeting tomorrow. And we have one of us who kind of, I'd say, loosely coordinates us, and that's Lucy Lipovsky from the Democrat Club. And so I think all of us look forward to getting together and listening.
We meet generally monthly, or we try to check in at least monthly, and we meet in community rooms in our respective condos.
And are the meetings, would you welcome newcomers to the meetings, or is this, you're sort of keeping it to yourself at this point?
This group, we like to keep it balanced, so it's, you know, 4 and 4. I think we're all very comfortable with that. And we have had changes in the group, but sort of, it's not a blackball situation, but I think we all have some input into who gets to join the group.
And if I could add something, Rousseau made a very big point that the group had to be even 4 and 4 or 5 and 5, and it had to remain stable. So it's not that we don't welcome people, it's the structure as she has laid it out for us. The initial group continues the discussion. Maybe she doesn't feel we're ready yet, but we traditionally don't have people coming in from the outside. Maybe it's a good idea. We hadn't really discussed it. Maybe we should discuss it.
Well, I can see why maintaining the balance and the consistency would be important in doing what you're doing, and that maybe for others who are interested in this idea, try to form their own groups with advice or help from either your group or Rousseau or somebody else. And that ties into another question that has come in. Have you spoken with other Republican and Democratic groups in the area? Well, I think we did answer that, but maybe there's more to that. And at your meetings, what is the format? Anybody? Scott, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting group because there is no leader. Okay, we all just sort of go there as equal cohorts, if you will. And Rochelle basically would have some sort of agenda in the back of her mind, and we'd come in and we'd start with that. And our meetings would normally last about 2 hours, and we would start off with whatever Rochelle wanted us to go on. But by the end of the meeting, it was hey, what are we doing next? And so we would start heading off that way. And we got more done in the last 30 minutes than we did in the first hour and a half. The first hour and a half is always about, listening, understanding. Like I said, we've yet to try to solve world hunger or world peace. It's just not what we're doing. But when we did the Ron Turner thing, I think that all happened in about 15 minutes. Where we just finally said, hey, what are we really going to do? And I think it was Lynn Larson who said, well, I know Ron Turner, what about if we have him talk? And that was all organized in 15 minutes. So, it's just a very, Rachel's got tremendous organization skills, and she gets to start it, and she has no idea where it's going to end up, and we don't either.
Is she typically part of your meetings?
Yes, very much so.
Another question about the way the group functions, is there a maximum number where dialogue and balance becomes more difficult to maintain?
We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah, there's no doubt that us being a small group and having got to know each other and earning each other's trust and respect has made it very easy for us. I don't know that you could do that if it's a 10v10 or a 20v20. Just it would take away from the personal aspect, I believe. So,
someone else wants to know if you've considered talking to students, high school or college level students.
Good idea.
Very interesting question. I was at New College the other night, and the president of New College asked if we'd be willing to come out and talk to them. I haven't talked to the group about that because we don't meet till tomorrow. But that does seem like a direction that we may be going.
Yeah, and a professor from there contacted us also about seeing what we could do together.
And that's so interesting that people are contacting us like we're doing something so revolutionary. What are we doing? We're simply talking to each other, and that people find that to be an exciting idea. I mean, we're here talking to you about 4 people talking to each other about politics in a democracy, and that's like revolutionary.
How can an interested person join these meetings? That's a question that came in. I'm sure it's probably on the minds of some of our other guests tonight. Maybe you covered that partially by saying, your group is stable and you know one another now and you have a level of trust, which helps to make the whole thing work. But I don't want to answer the question. How
I
can
think
you address
we need
it
to
first?
expand. And I think that's something we will put on the agenda tomorrow. How can we reach out to other interested people who want to participate? We should be doing that. And in fact, there was apparently, I saw an article, I sent it around to the group. Somebody put aside $100 million to fund groups like ours. And they're taking grants. So, I mean, this is not that, we didn't invent the wheel here. This is going on in other places, but yes, I think we do need to be more and more inclusive, because that's the point. The point is to get more people interested in talking across the aisle.
Here's another question, and it may lead into the part on your outline that you provided to us, which kind of, I think, raised a lot of interest among our little group. Tips for Thanksgiving dinner. But ahead of that, someone wants to ask you, have you discussed some of the conspiracy theories out there and how to figure out what is really true and what is not? And I too had a question about how you deal with misinformation, if you discuss that as an impediment to what you do together.
So my quick answer to that is no, we have not done anything like that. Probably the closest we came was the big lie. And when Bob was bringing it up, I interjected and said, hey, hold on a second. We have a duly elected president who's been confirmed by the Electoral College, confirmed by the Senate, and there's been absolutely no court that's overturned any of that. But that's really about the only conspiracy type theory that we've addressed. That's what, once again, I want to stress, we don't tackle the big issues as of yet. We haven't. We're going to have to if we're going to keep going. We have not done that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But Margaret, to your Thanksgiving dinner question, I think it is important to have political dialogue over Thanksgiving dinner with your family and friends. But to do so, you have to, I think, do several things. One, it's not a competition. As Bob mentioned earlier, you're not going to Thanksgiving dinner to win a debate. That's not going to work. You go to Thanksgiving dinner to have a discussion with, loving family and friends. And you want to bring two ears and one mouth to the discussion as well. So listening is twice as important as trying to get a point across. And as came out in a lot of Russell's work, establishing a mutual respect for one another's views is critical. You obviously like or love these people, and maybe you disagree with some of the views, but you want to start with the respect for that individual.
Anybody else want to jump onto that?
Yeah, we haven't discussed, for example, conspiracy theories, right? But we have discussed where can you go for a source of information that you think is balanced. And the way I look at it is I want somebody to give me the facts and I can figure them out. I don't want somebody to tell me what I should think of the facts, right? That's not what I'm looking for. So we have discussed news sources, whether it's the BBC or some other outlet. I think all agree that the current structure of the internet and social media and the news rewards crazy behavior. The wackier the thing is that you say, the more likely you're going to get contributions and listeners and likes and all that type of stuff. And I think, we all reject that type of situation.
This kind of leads into a good question about, have you talked about why or what has led America to this clash of extremes with a middle ground that seems to be sort of out, just not voiced.
We have somewhat. I think we all sort of coalesced on the press is a large part of the problem. They like to stir the pot. They'll stake a pole on the left and on the far right, and they're the ones that seem to get the microphone and get the attention. So we all more or less have come to an agreement on that. I'll let anybody else chime in that wants to.
I mean, there is now a business model in the media that you want to reward your listeners with things they want to hear. And that runs contrary to providing balanced news. And so the more we seek out those sources of information that confirm what we already believe anyhow, the more dug in we become. And there's also a basic tribalism now in America where you don't want to contradict your own tribe for fear of being thrown out of it. And that's one of the things that we don't fear among ourselves. We're not worried about having to stick to the party dogma, because that's not what our group is about. Our group is about exploring our discussions and recognizing that just because we say it doesn't make it right.
You know, a free press is a cornerstone to our democracy and to our nation's freedom, to say the least. So we've got to have a free press. But don't ever forget for a second, the media's first job is make money, and they have absolutely done a great job with that. And that's what they're doing, is selling it to their constituents.
Another thing that I would add to answer that question is, and probably the League of Women Voters has better information certainly than I have, and that is that we have so many of our precincts, our voting districts that have been victims of gerrymandering, so that we have all these areas that are all red or all blue. And so consequently in the primaries, what happens is the most extreme of the red or blue values and beliefs is what wins the primary. And so we generate more extreme candidates instead of candidates that are balanced and have to appeal to a moderate voter group across the board.
Do you think a lack of civics education in our schools is contributing to the prevalence of extremism in views and failure to understand the process? For instance, gerrymandering, the whole process of redistricting, which you're absolutely right, the League of Women Voters has been involved in that, and has taken a keen interest in it. And that's still to be determined because there's still an ongoing lawsuit here in Florida over a congressional map. But anyway, lack of civics education.
Yeah, I'd say that in general, civics education, but also a lack of critical thinking. Social science courses that address critical thinking are extremely important to the future of our country and our electorate. So education in general, but particularly areas of writing and thinking and communications that perhaps get left behind.
And we did discuss the fact that in America, politics has become not about good government, but about winning. And when winning is the only issue, good government suffers. And we all collectively lament that. We don't think this should just be about winning. And as long as it is, then the real point of a democracy, I think, is harmed.
One of our participants wants to know if you speak directly with each other, or do you use a structured model? And the example of the Braver Angels organization, which I'm not familiar with that, but does to explore conflicting positions by speaking to or through a moderator, which may or may not be Russell, as you mentioned her importance to the group. But do you speak directly to one another, or do you use that sort of a moderator mediator model?
We speak directly to each other, and I think, as Scott pointed out earlier, we feel free to contact each other. And so on the issue of critical race theory, like Scott said, when he called me up, I said, Scott, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me do some research. And then, I did some investigating and I shared some information. He shared some information. And, lo and behold, we probably agree on most aspects of that whole thing. Another example was Scott contacted me about the student loan forgiveness thing. And I said, listen, I hear you, right? I don't want to be the one who tells an apprentice plumber that they have to make the payments on their truck that they bought to bring their tools to the job every day, whereas a college kid doesn't have to pay off their student loans. That is a problem. However, we need school teachers, we need nurses, we need medical technologists, we need people with college degrees, and the college has gotten too expensive. So, we agreed the issue is complicated, but that was just individual conversations, checking things out with each other.
More questions, anybody? Would any of you, Paul, Bob, Scott, Ed, like to add anything else? I did see someone said, and I heartily agree, would you like to join the League of Women Voters? We'd love to have you.
Or not. So I think we're here to learn and to listen. And what we heard here today, we'll discuss tomorrow. We'll discuss the idea that was brought up. Why don't we find a way to expand people's participation? We'll discuss the idea of reaching out to high school kids and college kids. These ideas came from you. And so we just want the little stone in the water to make a bigger and bigger ripple, to where this is not something unusual and extraordinary that anybody would ask us, how do you come to talk to each other? This should be the default, and that's what we want. And if more people do it, and I personally believe that the midterms were an important election, not because of who won and who lost, but because the big lie was rejected. The Secretary of State's who said that they were concerned about election rigging and not fair and free elections, they all lost. I think it was a good day for democracy, and that's what we collectively all want. It's more important to have the democratic processes be protected than who wins and who loses.
So I think it'd be most beneficial if this is something that's interesting to the folks that are dialed in tonight. If they have an organization that they'd like us to try and talk to, we're more than willing to try and do it. But we need their help in order to get us around, to get us in front of other organizations.
Well, to that end, is there a point of contact that we could provide to people here where you can be reached in this capacity, or are you how would one of us reach you? Now I know who you are.
Well,
That's a great
Elena and I have been kind of communicating, and so I'd be happy to. Elena has my contact information, and I'd be happy to be a recipient. And then I'll take that information to the the other 7, the rest of the group, and we'll get back to people.
I think what we need to do is we need to do that. We've never done that. I mean, that is so obvious. And the answer is no, there's not. Now, Paul has volunteered, so we have one because Paul has volunteered, but we don't really have a formal place of contact. And again, I think that's something we'll talk about tomorrow.
You know, we've talked about coming up with a website or putting ourselves on Facebook or something.
Mhm.
And this is where we sort of ended up last season, if you would, before we took the summer break, is where do we go from here? And I think that's what tomorrow we're going to sit down and talk about.
Well, that's wonderful. So Elena will be the point of contact for our side, and then transmit any requests or questions or information to share with you all, I guess.
Great.
This has been wonderful. We've had an active chat here. Several people want to thank you. We all want to thank you for what you're doing, for modeling civil discussions, sharing with a wider community. This is what we sorely need. We all realize this. Someone is asking Elena if we can share your email in the chat. There you go. And we've got 2 minutes before 6:30, I think was our end time. Anybody want to chime in with a last?
Yeah, you've thanked us, Margaret. I think Bob started off, I think, thanking you, but we really appreciate the opportunity to get in front of an organization as important as the League of Women Voters.
Thank you.
And so we thank you for your time and for setting this up.
Well, I have to just say kudos to Elena Visveri, because she's the one who it was her idea. She brought it to the events committee. We all liked it, but you know, her persistence and getting this, you know, to where we had such a good hour with all of us together today. I thought we all, I'm sure, learned a lot, appreciate what you're doing, admire what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Anything
All right.
else? Do we
Thank you.
say good night, Gracie, or what do we do?
All right.
Okay.
Out
Thank
here.
Thank
you.
you, one and
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Night.
so
Bye.
very much, one and all. Good night.
Thank you and good night.
Thank
This was
you.
great.